all, welcome to everyone that's joining us. It's always great to put some time in the diary again to have another conversation around the Play Lab and what we're trying to achieve here. So, in terms of housekeeping, just stay on mute, I guess, is so there's no background noise would be fantastic. As we go, if there's any kind of questions, please put those in the chat. We'll monitor those and we can answer those as we go or at the end. And then probably the last one would be, just if you can, stay with us to the end, because that way we can ensure that all the information is communicated. There's going to be some QR codes at the end in terms of some packs to download and some information that's going to relate to the conversation that we'll have. For those that are listening in or here for the first time, Play Lab, I guess the whole idea around why we put together the Play Lab was to bring the science of play into a more practical application. What we do at Corporate Challenge is all about ensuring that play is embedded into the daily routines and rhythms of a team. And for us, we understand the science. We enjoy talking about the science, but we also want that to be very practical and easy to understand for organizations that we work with. So this is an opportunity to come on live and to ask some questions, to hear about the science, or to watch the recordings and understand how we go about putting our events together. Now, today is all around the engagement advantage. So the conversation is going to be around engagement with the team and how we can actually utilize some of the resources and information that we have to create better engagement. Before we get into what that looks like from an agenda point of view, those that I haven't spoken with before, my name's Shane. My role at Corporate Challenge is looking at client experience across the company. But I guess the main thing and why I'm passionate about having these conversations on the Play Lab is, look to how I can use my voice to shape a world where play is used to, live, learn, lead better. So for me, this is another opportunity to have some guests and have some information put out there that just helps understand play, understand someone to utilize play better as well. So that's a little bit about myself. And luckily enough, today I've actually got a special guest joining me in Matt, who is also a Corporate Challenge person. So, Matt, I'll let you do an introduction in a moment to yourself, mate. But I know as a colleague, someone that I respect immensely, the opinions. I know you've got a fantastic learning and development background. So just hearing your thoughts is going to be very, very beneficial. So is there anything you'd like to let everyone know about yourself, mate, and say hi?
Yeah, look, just g'day. Thanks for having me on today. So as Shane said, I'm one of the play specialists here at Corporate Challenge. My background is behavior change, probably for about the last 15 years or so. So that's incorporated like coaching, executive and leadership coaching, as well as a pretty strong learning and development background for the last decade or so. So been great bringing that lens into the area of play to just sort of explore, where there's areas that have really natural crossover in learning design and learning experience, as well as the events and programs that we're running at Corporate Challenge.
100%, mate. And I think with your background, as you mentioned, it's a different lens, and it's a lens that is really quite connected to the clients that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So you have the benefit of kind of both sides of what we do in play and, what really their clients are looking for from a ground level in terms of behavioral change and development within their team. So looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts. So in terms of a quick agenda, look, today, as I mentioned, it's about engagement and looking at that through a more useful lens. So where we'll start is just looking at the problem itself in engagement and why a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. From there, we'll discuss different ways to look at engagement, to frame it, different ways to think about engagement, and then kind of finish off with a more practical aspect of some tools and resources and frameworks that leaders can use to design their own experiences for their team. So the goal really is to, I guess, leave everyone with a clearer and more actionable way to influence their team through play and I guess creating better engagement overall. Where I want to start is the problem itself. So I guess this slide really it frames the problem up that engagement in itself, I guess, is still one of the biggest leadership challenges out there that we face in the workplace, and the one-size-fits approach doesn't work and never has. So the issue for me is not that leaders are ignoring it. It's about the frameworks and the resources they're putting in place aren't working. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 27% that are engaged in terms of the global workforce that Gallup researched. It would be a lot higher. So somewhere, Madam Ken, in your thought, there's 73% of people falling through the gap here on engagement. I'm keen to know, like with the teams you work with, do you think that's relative to kind of the percentages and the people and the teams that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair representation, and I think like I think a really easy way to relate to this or to consider this is to think of it from the perspective of you're up there facilitating a program, or you're in the room, you're in front of everyone, and you're trying to find ways to get them on board with whatever it is that you're about to do, whether that be some kind of play experience or like your more traditional leadership L&D. And it's that moment of looking around and sort of going, who wants to be here, who doesn't, who's looking at me, who isn't, and assuming that everyone is engaging with you purely through eye contact or purely through sitting on the edge of their seat, and rather being able to acknowledge that if someone's sitting there doodling on a piece of paper, that could be them using their brain to put it there so that they can focus on what you're saying. Or if someone gets up and needs to walk around the back of the room just so that they're moving at the same time, that could be them engaging as well. So I think a big part of this is the perception of leaders to assume that you engage the way that I do, and that's the only way that you engage.
Yeah, it's the one size fits approach. They're assuming that
Yeah.
it's going to land because it connects with them. And I guess
Mm.
what you've seen and what we're discussing today, right? The reason why we're having this conversation is that just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work, and it needs to be thought about more intentionally and redesigned to, yeah, higher, create further engagement in the team. So if we then agree, I guess that one size fits all approach doesn't work. I guess we probably need to discuss and look at how and why that could potentially be. So we use this phrase cognitive disposition, right? So essentially, we all have this bias that behavior is not fixed. We all think and react in different ways based on a lot of different, ideas and concepts of what connects with us. So really, for me, engagement in general is about how we connect and contribute as a team, and how can we create structures to land in that way, right? And if we know that people are different in how they do it, we need to think about the differences in individuals and look at the environment we create to do that better. And I guess looking at that statement at the bottom there around kind of the brainstorming, right? As an example, we could be in a brainstorming session and, there's an offer to have ideas thrown around and brainstorming, whether it's a problem or a project. And some people would really connect with that. They would love to share socially, the different ideas on the whiteboard and have their ideas developed. And someone else will have a slower entry point. They might, like you said, Matt, before, want to just come up with the solutions individually on their own. Think about the problem. Now, that doesn't mean they're doing it incorrect. It's just a different way of engagement showing up. So have you seen that, Matt, in terms of like different teams you work with? Like I can give examples of activities that we run where we see that play out all the time. Keen on your thoughts on how that
Oh,
manifests in a
yeah. I
team.
mean, sometimes even just getting into an activity, right? And you start to explain to everyone what it is that we're going to be doing for the next 15 minutes or whatever, right? And you'll see some people that are like, yep, great, let's go, ready to jump in straight away. And then you see other people that are sort of giving you that look of, can you say the same thing again in a different way so that I can wrap my head around it? Because they just need that little bit more detail, or they need to understand in a different way. So just having enough space or enough range, as you said there, for everyone to be able to connect with what's happening and what's going on.
Mhm. Yeah, look, I look at it like typically the problem solving based activities, like we run like a shapes based activity, and you see some people jump in and share ideas and thoughts straight away, and some people being a bit more reserved around thinking about the problem, reinforcing their own mind what needs to happen, and they're both brainstorming solutions just in a very different
Hmm.
way you go about it.
Some people are doing it like really hands-on, right? And they're there with the shapes and they're moving things around because visually for them that's working. And then there's someone sitting right next to them with a pen and paper, drawing up all the different ways that it could be done theoretically.
Correct, exactly right. And I guess linking back to what you said earlier, right? The leader or the person who's in charge of that team may look at that snapshot and say, right, you are more engaged because you're communicating and sharing thoughts with ideas in the way that suits you. Whereas that individual who's just taking the time to align their thoughts is still as engaged as the other person that's being more socially involved, right? So I think that's, yeah, it's important to understand. Look, okay, so that's the engagement side of things, not one size fits all approach. I guess we need to then go into what that means and what that looks like in more detail. Now, if we look at like play as an advantage in itself, let me just go through here. Um, so for me, and Ken, and your thoughts, like play gives a more useful lens for understanding engagement, right? So, play is often seen as something separate than engagement, but it's clearest, I guess, expression in the form is that's what engagement is, right? It's play, it's enjoyment, it's having us in this state of, presence and so forth. So as a team, we talk about, measuring metrics around engagement, but play is that human state which allows that to come out. So for me, again, it's if we want to perform better as a team, we need to understand one, everyone is a little bit different in how they go about engaging, and we need to create systems and environments to utilize that. So we're talking about that state. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think and I know we're going to touch on this a little bit later as well. But importantly to understand that when we're saying play, it's not asking you to jump in the sandbox and start building castles. And let me give you a prime example, because this is the example that runs through my head when I think of how I've used play in the workplace throughout my career. I worked in a big four. It was 6,000 people in one building. You could get the lift up to level 25 at the same time every single day and never be with the same people. And when I first started working there was that expectation or that pressure, I think, that it's not suit and tie, but there's corporate professional, right? And there's a way that you show up and there's a way that you exist in that space. That's super not me. It's a little bit suffocating, I think, to my personality. And so my way of playing or pushing back on that, which allowed me to be more of myself, was to rock up in jeans and Converse and a t-shirt, and be in the elevator with a bunch of people in suits and heels and the works. And that state that it would put me in would allow me to contribute more to a team because I was in a state that was right for me. And so that's how I kind of see the correlation of play in my own career. But just an example of what it unlocks in a workplace interaction.
Yeah, and it's taking responsibility to understand how play influences your ability to perform at your best is there as well, right? Because I think too often, as you mentioned, people see players stopping work and a move away from the serious stuff, but they wait for someone to take the responsibility to organize that or to create that environment. And until that time comes, they're too serious, right? So it
Yeah.
sounded like in your environment there, you took responsibility for yourself to go, right, if I want to get the best out of myself and I am in this environment that is quite serious most of the time, I need to express play in the way that connects with myself, which is great because I think it's misunderstood and it's not done enough. And I know we've spoken about this previously. I had Hugh on the webinar. Hugh is from New South Wales, and he shared the same thoughts around organisations that just don't take responsibility, or people don't take responsibility to play themselves, and they wait for someone else to do that. So
Yeah, and interestingly, right, like I think it's a lot easier to put that lens on it retrospectively, right? Like I can look back at it and go, oh, that was actually me playing. Like that was me sort of stirring the pot in the way that I needed to stir the pot. At the time, I was very much looking at it as like, oh, I'm sticking it to the man here, like I'm pushing back hard, and they're two really different approaches until it was sort of explained to me as play is when I can look back and go, oh no, that's totally what it was, right? That was me finding my space to be comfortable and allow myself to contribute more effectively because of that.
for sure. And it's an interesting comment you made because it leads into this statement right here around the research on playful work design. And then if employees who intentionally introduce play elements into their own task, actually record higher same day engagement scores. There's been a study. And what I love about that statement is exactly what you just said, right? It's about including play in your own rhythm. Some people won't recognize that as play yet. We certainly would. But it's really them getting the best out of themselves to perform as a unit, right? So, for me, it's gamification and everything. It's looking at how I can take a task and create different metrics that might not mean anything to anyone else, whether I'm competing against time pressure I've put on myself, whether I've created these fictitious milestones. Play is gamification because I'm an explorer who likes to compete that way. Um, is there any other way that you create play in your daily life, mate? Now you've obviously taken the step into a more of a playful approach into what you do for work every day. Has that opened up a new opportunity just to see how your rhythm goes?
That's a really interesting question. Like in my day to day, do I look at things through a play lens more, I suppose? I think so. I think when you start sort of living and breathing something everywhere, then it just starts to show up everywhere as well. Um, so yeah, look, I think everything from like what you're saying about gamification is interesting because I think over the last 5 years or so, anything that comes down to learning and development or growth, there's been a conversation about how do we gamify this experience? How do we make this more enjoyable? And so companies and organizations are already trying to look through a play lens and trying to find ways to do it. And I think there's just the only roadblock or bottleneck that people are facing is a fear of, um, you know, but is it still impactful if people are having fun almost, right? But yeah, when I sort of look at my life generally and I guess the way that I approach life, there are things that are a bit more lighthearted and I mean that's fish philosophy, right? Like I'm showing like deciding how we show up and incorporating play. So yeah, for sure.
100%, mate. Yeah, it's an interesting lens that we now look at that we see play everywhere and we see what might not be considered play in one person as, hey, that is a playful expression of themselves. And when we talk, play styles and dimensions and personalities, it's all relevant to that. And it's very interesting from a science point of view for sure. I guess because in a minute, I guess we're going to go into some frameworks, right? And I know you've got some thoughts on how organizations can, I guess, stair step their way into creating an engaging environment and designing that from your L&D background. But it's important to recognize that, again, play is both simple and complex. And there's an example that, and I bring this up because we will talk around, the different play personalities and so forth and what that looks like. But let's take a hypothetical example of Sarah and Sophie, right? Identical twins. And let's say they both have this tendency to want to play in a physical nature. So move their bodies, what we'd call a kinesthetic or a moving type kind of play personality. But it's very interesting that one may enjoy solo play in terms of the physicals. They may enjoy, Sarah might enjoy going for a run on her own and being in her own thoughts and just being out in the environment on her own and still playing. But Sophie may represent more of I guess, a team sport, the social connection of physical play. And I just bring that up because I think it's again relevant to know both move their body, both physical. It's play for both people. However, there's dimensions there as well. That some people will feel more inclined to be solo when they do it. Some people will feel more of a social setting, and that kind of speaks to understanding the people in your team. So then you can engage the frameworks we speak about. Um, is that something you see as well with different people you work with, Mark?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like uh I think very rarely will you find someone that doesn't value growth or play. But quite regularly what you will see is that people who want to get the same outcome differently. So, it's everything from how you interact with someone, and this can be as simple as the preferences on how you present something online or face to face, in the office or working from home. Um, Walking meetings to formal sit downs, right? Like it's all growth, it's all same outcome. It's a different route to get there, but it's the one that's most comfortable for the people that are in the room.
Yeah. And I guess how do you identify that is the question, right? That's the $1 million question. How do
Yeah,
you,
well, yeah, yeah, 100%. Like, is it as simple as just sort of going, what's your preference on how you like to meet? or how you like to learn or how you like to grow. Do you need someone who's checking in with you regularly? Do you need an environment that is quiet and slow paced or really quick and loud? Like what's going to engage you more? Like maybe it's as simple as asking the question, what do your people want?
For sure. Absolutely. So then that leads us to something I know we've had conversations about, previously, mate, and kind of like, how do we actually get to that level to have those conversations and I guess stair step our way into creating an environment, going from the theory of what we're talking about to something that's more practical from a leadership perspective. Within our programs, I know we do this organically when we have conversations around different activities and the elements that within the activities, how to create the right balance for different personality types and really giving permission to play. But if we look at a company's environment in general and their workplace environment, I'm keen to get your thoughts on how this can play out for a leader that wants to go, right, I'm committed to creating a more designing a more engaging environment and using this variety, balance, and choice model. How would that play out? Where would you start as a leader?
Um, yeah, look, a really simple example to that is our bike building program. But I mean, it's the same application for every single program that we have. But like a really good example is the bike build because what looks like a one team activity is actually designed with different ways in. So when we're talking about variety, it's about the different roles that are inside the same experience. So in the bike build, that might mean that some people are focused on the puzzle. It might be that some are really into physically building the thing, and the rules might only allow a certain number of people on the tools at once. But there's multiple ways to contribute to the same end outcome here. The next one up is balance, and that's about the right design conditions, I suppose. So this is where team size really matters. So you want to have enough people for collaboration, and so that there's diversity of thought, because we know that when there's diversity in our thinking, that we come out with better answers to better questions, but not so many people that everyone sort of becomes passengers in the conversation. So we're also balancing action with problem solving and challenge with enough clarity that people can still find their place in there. And then the last one at the top of the pyramid there is choice. So it's about having a permission for people to play. So we set that up right at the beginning by formally inviting people into the experience that we're about to take them on. We give them permission to clear their mind, an ability to be curious and to just sort of go with the flow. And that matters because even in a really well-designed activity, people still need to feel safe enough to step in. So ultimately, the shared outcome is the same, but the path into the engagement isn't. And that's really the point. Good design doesn't ask everyone to engage in one way. It creates enough range for more people to find a natural way in. And if this model looks familiar, I know there's some fellow learning nerds on the call today as well, or L&D nerds. If this model looks familiar, it's because it should. It's a tried and true tested principle, right? That it's foundational. So if we're talking Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, if we're talking Bloom's taxonomy, right, specifically to learning and creating an environment where people can learn, that's what this is saying. It's suggesting that it's foundational. Neither one of these is more important than the other, but you will have better success with every single one if you can nail the foundations of it first. So creating a space where there's variety will allow you to strike the right balance that gives people the permission to play.
Yeah. And do you think then, Matt, that people make the mistake of trying to go for perfectionism rather than just personalization in any experience, and they try and think of all the details that again suits themselves rather than realizing it will be a very personalized experience as they go through as a team member?
Yeah, absolutely. But then on the other end of that stick, right? Like there's also the maybe problem of going too far down the line with bringing in everyone else's concerns as well. And so it's not just your own perfectionism that you're chasing, but it's everyone else's. And if you're not willing to take on that diversity of thought, that's when you'll start to get into the spiral of this event isn't going to isn't going to go any good. So I think if we're too busy chasing perfect for me, we're missing out on opportunity for everyone.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And it's an interesting snapshot that we have with our clients because we can have a 100, 200 people. I think you've got a 450 person event tonight in front of our in front of our events, and then we don't know all these people. So we really are committed to this model and this structure because we know that there's going to be different play personalities, there's going to be different play styles, solo play, group play involved in this 2 or 3 hour snapshot that we have. So for us to engage, we need to actually be very thoughtful in creating and using this in how we put
Yeah.
together.
And look, the event that's on as you mentioned, I've got a program that I'm running off to straight after this, 450 people through the evening. And one of the first questions that they asked me was, like, are you able to sort of go with the flow if something goes wrong on the night? If the timings aren't working right, if people aren't engaging in a particular way, like, are you open to just sort of changing it up as we go? Absolutely. Like the outcome should not be that the run sheet goes perfectly. The outcome should be that everyone has been able to engage in a way that's good for them.
Yeah, for sure. And something which changed in myself because I've been doing this a long time was that permission to play. I think when I started working with teams, I was very caught in that mindset of I'm here to do a job for you. You need to engage with me. And then the last few years, just inviting people to give themselves permission to disconnect from whatever their stresses are and be present in however they experience play has changed the dynamics of my programs. I think that's an important one to recognize, that getting permission from the leaders to play and also giving permission to yourself to just be present in the moment and to enjoy the experience and play is important.
Yeah, and I think one of the easiest hacks to doing that is to pass the mic, as it were, right? Like it's not about me being up front and being seen in the spotlight to have all the answers and know all the things and lead us in the direction. Pass it over and what do you guys think we're doing today? Like this next activity is called this. What do you think it's going to be about? And you're opening doors for contribution straight off the bat.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So it probably brings us then to looking at the types of play and the dimensions, right? So I guess there's many different ways to categorize the types of play, but it is important to recognize that it's multidimensional, right? So there's many different ways to access that state that you mentioned earlier of play. We've already spoken about the social play and so forth, but this slide is how our partner at the National Institute for Play has given us some information and put together the different types of play to understand what's going on within ourselves and within our team. So, to give some examples, there's a really big crossover between different types of play when you're in the moment. So, if I take an example like someone doing a dance as an example, right? Now that is typically physical play, moving the body, moving around. However, if you're doing it in a group, it can be a social thing as well, like we've already said with Sophie and the running and the creative, but it's a creative expression of play as well around moving the choreography. If you then move to the other side of things and you look at rock climbing as an example, right? Now that would be right down that risky play zone, but it's still physical. So, I guess it's important to recognize that there's a crossover within all these, and someone who's looking at designing experiences to create the best engagement needs to consider these aspects at all times. Like for me, I don't know where you sit, mate, but for me, I'm physical and competitive all the time, right? That's where I enjoy. And then there's some object play. The bike building is our example, right? When you get hands on, you get to actually use your hands. So where would you sit personally, mate, in terms of what engages you the most? What do you
Oh,
say?
mate, I'm right up at 1 o'clock social play. Like a friend of mine once said to me that they could play with dirt in the gutter if they were with their mates, and I'm very much on that bandwagon, right? Like if I'm connecting with people, I'm playing, I'm having fun. I don't care where we are or what we're doing. We're together doing it.
Yeah, but just also, yeah, for sure. 100%. So yeah, I find it very interesting, but it's a side note or a cliff note that when you're looking at designing for an engagement, there are some aspects that cross over and you need to, I guess, keep in mind for your team dynamics as well. That then leads us, and I'm really keen to hear about the Joker in you, mate, because we all have these play personalities. If anyone's heard me talk previously, I'm a kinesthetic or I'm an explorer, so growth and moving my bodies. I know previously I've had Dwayne on, who is right down the competitor aspect. He likes competing with himself and how he can fiddle around with, competition. Hugh is all about moving his body, but I know you're unique here, and you just touched on it before, Matt, right? Joker. what does that mean to you? Like, because very rarely do I get to experience a Joker in terms of a personality. I'm keen.
Um, ah, look, I was equal parts surprised and unsurprised when I found out that's actually what it was labeled as. I think there's class clown aspect that comes into that, right? But for me, where it shows up the most, where Joker shows up for me the most, is definitely, and please don't take too much pity on me for this, is definitely in like self-deprecating humor, right? Like I will absolutely take the mick out of myself up in front of a crowd to get a giggle out of people because that makes me feel good knowing that they're feeling good. That's how Joker shows up for me. It's finding little ways to be able to get people laughing or actually seeing that they're having fun. I feel like I'm being a successful Joker. And I think the easiest way to compare this to something is the Joker in the King's Court, right? They've got one job, and that is to entertain. And I definitely feel like that sometimes, not just in my work, but in social circles as well. Like it's how I interact with my mates. It's, if I'm out at the pub and I'm having a couple of beers with people, I'll be trying to keep the conversation going through self-deprecation in some instances, and even just like trying to find a common thread of something that is funny,
Yeah.
which, given the world that we're living in at the moment, is easy enough to do. Yeah.
This is true. This is true. And it probably connects very well with that social setting you mentioned before as well. It's hand in hand, right? But it's interesting how we all have all these play personalities. And I know within our own team, there's 8 personalities there. We probably have a representation from them all. So, coming together and just having conversations around how they show up in our daily life is very interesting, in
What I
fact.
think is really interesting about this as well, though, is to try and pinpoint where you think you are,
Yeah.
and then ask someone where they think you are before you actually get your results, right? Like show someone else and go, this is what they are, this is what the personalities are. What do you think I am? I think you're this. I think I'm that. And then see what it comes out as, because I think it's interesting to to understand where others see you, because that's based on observable behaviors rather than something that's, I guess, introspective, which is just for yourself to sort of go, I think I'm this because of X, Y, and Z. But how often do we miss the mark on what we think versus what we do? So it's really interesting, I think, to ask someone else their perspective and then to get your own perspective around it as well. And where it's perfectly aligned, great, excellent, you're perfect. You need no growth, no change. But if there is change that you want to see, it's good to know where your starting point is and where you want to get to as well.
Sure. And you mentioned before getting your results. So for anyone listening in, we do have a play personality quiz that you can take that I think you've obviously taken, why you were surprised at your results. So we will put a link in the chat and send that out after. So if you haven't taken that personality quiz, it's a great thing to do with your team, to do with yourself, and start that conversation on, yeah, where you sit within your play personality. If we move towards the direction of, I guess, opportunities in the workplace, because something I don't think we're guilty of a map, but something we can forget sometime is we love play, we see opportunities for it, but there's a lot of serious work that needs to happen within an organization. So a great starting place is to go, what is already happening? What environments do you find yourself in on a daily basis? And how can you use those to incorporate this engagement advantage of play, right? So there's a few key areas here being, meetings and the way we communicate, our rhythms, project work. So I guess what I'm encouraging for everyone listening in is how can you look, because I'm sure you have some of these rituals and some of these environments on a day basis. How can you start to interact differently and use play as that advantage? For me, the team meetings is a great opportunity, right? Where these personalities can come up. It can be a walking meeting. Like I said, it can be the jokes, it can be the shared wins. It's just there's so much that can come out of being more intentional rather than, just running the same agenda over and over.
Yeah, and if anyone is genuinely interested in trying to change their own rhythm or trying to incorporate play into their existing workplace rhythm, I would suggest that the best spot to start is to just pick one, right? Don't come in trying to go, I'm going to completely flip the culture of this place onto its head by creating a place that is permission to play for everyone and everyone loves coming in. Find one spot that you think that could do with some play or would benefit from play, or even would be open to bringing play in, and watch it spread. right? The same way that a rotten apple can spread in a barrel, so too can play in a positive way.
For sure. And again, interesting you say that, because I know previous questions we've had leading into kind of different webinars is around being a leader yourself, because sometimes the leadership of an organization doesn't think around players beneficial. And the way to do that is to, I said, start small and spread. Once you start seeing different results and different engagement, that information will spread up the chain of command very quickly, and everyone will be able to learn and evolve that way. So I think you're right in what you're saying. Start small, micro play, pick one, and then see where it leads is a good starting spot. So if we go back then a step to the workplace application, I know, when you spoke earlier of the model, and I know we've probably covered some of these points already, we spoke in particular about our own programs and how we look at the program design. But if we look at the workplace application more than anything, I'm keen to get your opinion on variety, balance, and choice, again, on starting small on each of them and how that can be more intentional within a small team environment.
Yes, I mean, small little 1% changes can be really hard to spot, but really obvious once they're going. And so for something like variety, it means like designing work so that it doesn't unfold in only one way, right? We can mix reflection, discussion, and action so that there's more movement here in how people engage. For something like balance, it's more about conditions. So we spoke earlier about how team size matters. Often 5 to 9 people creates a better environment for bonding and contribution. And that's why the teams that we work with when we run programs, our magic number is 7. If the wider group is larger, we do breakouts, right? We put them into individual teams, and that helps to create that smaller group dynamic so that no one's getting lost in the crowd and no one's becoming the ringleader either. So the balance also means getting the pace, the challenge, and the clarity right for the group in front of you as well. And then on choice, so even in a really well-designed environment, people still need to make the decision to step in. The choice is really fundamental to that. So leaders can invite people in, they can model it, they can make it feel safe, but they can't force it, because that's when you get into this feeling of, tick box exercises. So you want people to want to step into this. So when people feel that natural permission to enter, then engagement just becomes a lot easier to access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good points. Absolutely. And what we've put together, I don't know if you've seen this, Matt, but is a culture playbook, again, to help that process take place organically. So for anyone listening in, I'm going to put a QR code on the screen in a minute, but really there's 3 steps to this culture playbook of how you get to a point around being more intentional. So the first one is reflection. So how we can look at the team dynamics in terms of reflecting on ourselves, just thinking about what we've already discussed, Matt, your play personality, what do you find energizing? How do you focus best? What kind of breaks you need? All these dynamics personally. So I think the individual reflection is the first step of the book, right? If the culture playbook, it's understanding that's a starting point. Hard to have a conversation without the self-awareness of that.
Yeah, and I think what I really like about this as a first step is that it stops leaders from making assumptions too early. So the playbook will give you it'll give you a leader intro. There's individual reflection prompts, there's coaching notes, so that it doesn't become a vague culture conversation. It kind of helps to surface the moments that feel natural rather than forced, and that gives you just much better raw material to work with as a team.
Agreed. Absolutely. So step 2 then becomes the discovery, right? So you've done the self-reflection. We start the conversations, right? It's about, there's introductions in the book of how to actually lead that conversation from a leader, how to have the discussions with the team, and what you're looking for are these shared conditions, repeated themes, because it's a lot easier to take the themes and the conditions that are already in place and evolve those than it is to reinvent the wheel, right? So it becomes really practical, right?
And this is where the playbook as a tool becomes practical and tangible almost in conversation, because we're not just listening for nice moments or isolated preferences. We're actively looking for overlap. So if multiple people are saying that they engage better when they've had time to think before speaking, or when a group is smaller, or when learning includes practice, that starts to tell us useful things about how work could be designed better.
Correct. Exactly right. Which then leads to looking at the rhythms, step three, the rhythms of the day, the work, the meetings, all these things that are there in place, right? And how you can utilize those rhythms to get the best out of your team, right? So I think this is the part that really, leaders need, because it's one thing to say we have this self-awareness, we have these shared contributions, but now how are we actually going to take that and put it into our daily rhythms is critical. So if we can take step one, step two, step three. So yeah, look, it's a resource for everyone listening in. The QR code is there, but there's obviously another one just here. So really to take the guesswork out of it, that's the whole idea, right, Matt? It's take guesswork out, follow the system of experts who do it for a living every single day, and then be able to evolve your team engagement and dynamics as you go. I'm also really keen that if anyone on the call here downloads this, provide feedback, see how it works, get in contact with us because we're always keen to hear the different stories on how people are utilizing the different tools as we go. So, look, from my perspective, I think there was a lot there today, Matt. In terms of just understanding, it's about understanding yourself, it's about understanding your team, and how the representation of play is very unique in each of us as individuals, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And yeah, sorry for the word vomit. Lots of information to take away, obviously. But I mean, for me, I think that the summary is to just to step back out of it a little bit, right? And consider what's the end impact and who's the end impact for. Um, that's what's going to help you to design engaging workshops, events,
mm,
programs, seminars, whatever it might be. Who are you doing this for?
sure. And I don't think you need to survey your team to understand that if your team engagement is low, high, where it sits. You'd know that organically by looking at your team. And my encouragement would be that if it's not where it needs to be, um, you know, take control of actually evolving that and responsibility as a team to go, right, we're going to create something intentional here. And this is another tool and resource that works to do that. Because yeah, I think the figure was what, over $400 billion in the US, right, on that study of disengagement. So, if your company is in that boat, then there's action that needs to be taken and involvement. So, in terms of moving forward, I always like to give a bit of a snapshot of what's next. So something that we've identified within ourselves at Corporate Challenge is we have spoken a lot of theory, a lot of science application on these play labs as we've gone. Something we haven't done is actually bring some of these little micro play sessions to life. So ideas of, right, how do it could be on an online session like we are now, bring your team into an engaging format. So we actually want to run a micro play session in May. And I'm going to have a guest, Kieran from Corporate Challenge as well, who's going to help with that and actually have some fun. Do one of our activities as a group, see where it lands, have a discussion around how that can be utilized as a team. So I'd really encourage everyone to step into that, to come along, to want to learn how people who do this for a living explain the activities, but even bring your team along for a bit of fun. It might just be that 45 minutes out of their day that kind of reconnects everything as well for them. So again, QR code there to sign up. We'll share that around post event as well. So, look, from my perspective, Matt, I want to say thank you, mate. As I said, I've enjoyed hearing your thoughts and your opinions on what this needs to go. It's someone who's been in the learning, development, behavioral change field their whole life. Now they get it, right? They understand play. It's interesting for me to have discussions over the last few months with you around your lens of play and how it's evolving. And I think some fantastic insights. So if you want to hear from Matt again, I'm sure we can pass some details along that anyone can get in contact with you and answer any questions or give some further thoughts. He is based in Victoria. We can,
Absolutely. Hit me up. Let's have a chat.
yeah,
Super keen to get on the phone with anyone. I've already told you that my way of playing is social. So that's my way of connecting. So yeah, if there's anything else that you want to learn more about, or you want clarity on, or you just want to nerd out about some stuff related to play and learning, matthew@corporatechallenge.com.au.
Good man. Yeah, appreciate it. Look, there was no questions in the chat today, but again, if there's any questions post-event, send them through, whether it's Matt, myself, or anyone on the team. Always happy to answer those and have a play-based conversation. So thank you so much, Matt, for joining. Thank you, everyone,
Thanks,
for
mate.
listening in if you're watching the recording, or to those that attended live. Very much appreciate your attendance, and hopefully there was a bit of value there in terms of taking away some points to work with your team. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.